Hello and welcome to our first post-election
First post-election podcast.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's only the 8th, but it feels like a lot of water has gone under the bridge, doesn't it?
He's got a lot done, hasn't he?
He has, and I don't know what you think, Matt, but watching him on Saturday at his press conference, press conference as Prime Minister, he gave a really good account of himself, and he's sort of administrator-in-chief to the nation, isn't
I thought that was a great way of describing him that you came up with, administrator-in-chief. But it cuts both ways, doesn't it, potentially?
Yes,
in that there's
it
a
does.
slight lack of razzmatazz, maybe. But
100%.
he looked like an adult in the room, which was a change.
I mean, the first thing to acknowledge, I guess, is that after 8 years of craziness and infantilism and bluster and tetchiness, seeing someone who was, at minimum, A, grown up and calm, but B, also, I mean, it reminded me a lot of what Tom Baldwin said this time last week about how Starmer had said to him how frustrated he'd been in opposition.
Yeah.
The most wasted he got the least out of the last 9 years he ever had in his life.
Yeah.
And he looked to me like a person who felt liberated because he could get back to doing stuff.
Yeah.
And he's obviously pretty confident as a doer, isn't he?
Well, there were a couple of answers to questions he gave at that press conference, which I thought were slightly illuminating in that he could have answered differently.
Mm-hmm.
One was somebody asked him, "Are you comfortable with being called Prime Minister
Yes.
now?" And he sort of laughed a little bit, but behind the laugh, I sensed a bit of, "Can we just move on from all the ha 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 stuff, and get to substance?" And then he said, "Well," and he gave a very serious answer.
He gave an excellent answer.
He said, "Yes, I am. I don't mind people calling me Keir, but I have said to the civil servants that I understand why they should call me Prime Minister." And I thought that was a great answer because they're respecting the office.
I mean, this is just anecdotal, but I got a message from a permanent secretary today saying that it is like a different world because you just know that you're not going to be instantly blamed in the Express or the Mail for the first fuck up, and I think that is true of them. I think that they are, I was going to say traditional, but normal in their attitude to civil servants being there to enact their wishes, but not to bend to their political will, as it were.
I've often said that, if these Tory prime ministers that we've had a rash of, if they were chief executives they would get lacerated at any board meeting. The chairman would be saying, "What the hell are you doing to this company?" And none of them would be able to respond in anything other than kind of second-rate answers. But and none of them filled you with confidence. And this is a phrase Steve Anglesey, the editor of the New European, often uses about people. He says he fills you with confidence, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And it's about manner and approach and language and attitude and temperament. And Keir Starmer does fill you with confidence.
He really does. There's absolutely no question about that. And then we had Rachel Reeves today, fast out the traps, first female chancellor, and has announced some very crunchy measures on cutting through planning red tape, house building, getting rid of the ban on onshore wind farms. I mean, these are substantial measures.
Yeah.
And I thought the speech was good, and I thought she, like Starmer, clearly feels much happier now doing rather than just talking.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a big battle.
Yeah.
And one can remember the 2021 Chesham and Amersham by-election in which the Tories lost on a 30-point swing to the Lib Dems, partly over NIMBY objections to their planning reforms. So this is the time. If you're a new government with a 170-seat majority, 174-seat majority, this is the time to get onto that.
And this is what we said in our last episode on the special on the morning of the election.
Absolutely.
We said, there are going to be very contentious issues he's going to have to do, and now is the time to do it. And
absolutely.
We wondered, would he? And he is. So
and he is.
Super reassuring.
So, and I think, also on the credit side, he's brought in some very impressive outsiders. The acronym that's being used is GOAT, which is confusing because people use that for greatest of all time as well, government of all the talents. And, you've got Alan Milburn being brought back in to help with streeting at the Health Department. You've got Nick Bowles, who's an uber Tory moderniser, being approached to help them with planning. You've got James Timpson, CEO of Timpson Group, who's a very interesting and sort of enlightened character, being prisons minister. It's really, and then one which obviously caused a bit of ruffles was he brought in Richard Hermer Casey as Attorney General, dislodging Emily Thornberry, and I mean, from what I can work out, there's nothing sinister in that. It's just that, Starmer is a lawyer before he's a politician, and I think Hermer is a very, very distinguished lawyer, and I think he wanted someone in that job who he felt was absolutely first rate on the law.
Because that has been the spikiest element of it, hasn't it? And Emily Thornberry today posted a statement and described herself as very sorry and surprised not to continue the 3 years of shadow Attorney General. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, it was a bit of a kick to her. No,
it was.
No question.
I think that Keir Starmer is someone who for whom the rule of law, and especially human rights law, is much more important than socialist doctrine. Yeah. I mean, that's where he starts as a person. And so the job of Attorney General, which is always important, don't get me wrong, but for him, I'm sure he would be choosing it as he would if he was setting up new chambers. Yeah. He'd think, who's the best? Yeah. And I assume they know each other. I mean, it's been indicated that the conversations about all these people have been ongoing for some months. So
6 months apparently.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't think there's anything beyond that in it. I mean, it is a snub to Emily Thornberry. Yeah. And she's obviously very hurt, and there are always consequences for hurt in politics. But having said that, I think that it's also, I do wonder whether he wanted to make it clear that there's no automaticity in all of this.
Right, yeah.
Best person for the job.
Yes, state before party. Yeah.
State before party.
Yeah, which is something he's said time and time again.
And I think also in the legal area, he must foresee, this is public, it's not private. He is powerfully aware of the pressures in this country and in other parts of Europe on the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think that a sort of keynote of his premiership, whatever else happens, will be a staunch defence of that, and perhaps also a desire to help the court reform itself a little bit. And that involves having a real top gun there, a legal top gun, not just a politician. Yeah. The
outsider, I thought, might come to drive some tension between the government and the talent, if you like, the independent talent, is Timpson. Yeah. Because, and again, in the press conference, this was noticeable that somebody asked him about prisons, and he was asked 3 questions about prisons. Yes. I think so. The media, I think, sense that there's a potential area of vulnerability.
Well,
here.
There is.
And Keir Starmer said in one answer, well, I can't build a new prison overnight, but they haven't spent half the money, and there's all this. So in other words, we'll start building prisons. And then the very next question, he was asked, well, do you agree with James Timpson, who says that he thinks only a third of people in prison right now should be in prison?
Which is a very radical position. And it could be the case, but what you have to do if you're going to follow that logic of release 2/3 of prisoners is spend a lot of money on rehabilitation, on community service outside prison that has a punitive dimension to it, but doesn't involve incarceration, and be able to sell it to your more small C conservative voters as not a soft touch measure. Timpson's right in the sense that prisons at the moment are just warehouses for recidivism. People go in at huge cost and then come out and go back in again.
Straight back in.
The cycle of crime is not being dealt with. And to add to the cost, another reason that the prisons are full is so many people are on remand because the court system is bogged down. So if you want to be Timpsonian about it, you're going to have to spend some money, which is, of course, what they can't do at the moment.
But this is where the dynamic is difficult when there's absolute clarity. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do to bring in people who actually know what they're talking about.
And Patrick Vallance.
And Patrick Vallance,
we haven't mentioned,
So that's the right thing to do. But then you can't get away from the fact that it is politics.
Yes.
And politics is a multi-dimensional game. And if James Timpson sits around the cabinet table and says, this is the way forward, and we've got to do this. And the reality, and Rachel Reeves says, well, we agree in principle, but there's no doubt, right? And actually, what the public actually want, our people tell us, is they want, the worst thing that could happen is a release and then a load of repeat crimes
absolutely.
from people who've been let go. Can you imagine the Daily Mail headlines?
This man was let go because of...
someone said some young and not untalented writer for the Daily Telegraph tweeted, I look forward to being raped under the Labour, the Labour government. All right, so that's absolute nuttiness, but that is the very sharp edge of an editorial line of thinking.
It's the end of a spear that is going to, I mean, here we've got, we're up against we've hit the first sort of speed bump of actually existing Starmerism, which is there's been, since Michael Gove famously said people have had enough of experts, right? There's been this kind of ridiculous idea that, and you saw it in COVID and after COVID, this idea that, experts were somehow suspect.
Yeah.
And it's even worse in the States where poor old Anthony Fauci has, had to carry security.
Completely vilified.
And so I'm glad on that, under that rubric, that Vallance has been brought in as a science minister. But of course, one can overcorrect, and politics is about more than expertise plus power. It's about, as you say, Matt, it's about a constant sense of what Philip Gould, the new Labour pollster, used to call the daily mandate.
Yeah,
which is, how's this playing? Now, that can go too far, where you're constantly course correcting because of some focus group in Watford. You don't want that, but it's not enough just to be right. Yes. You have to sell the policy. You have to reassure people. I mean, saying we're going to let 2/3 of prisoners out, which, to be fair to Timpson, I think is not what he's saying, actually. But that kind of sense that, hang on, are Labour a soft touch on crime, which I don't think they are, but that will need to be tamped down. And so the sort of initial flurry of excitement around Timpson's appointment needs to be, and I think Yvette Cooper has been trying to do this, just calm people and say, we are not soft on crime, we're not soft on the penal system, but we are open to necessary reform.
And by the way, just for people who don't subscribe to the New European, if there is such a character out there.
Shame on you.
I know. But in the next couple of weeks, we'll do something about how prisons are managed across Europe, and where is the inspiration to take from other nations about how can you manage a criminal population in an optimal way. So I think
that's great, because I think that the kind of government that Starmer wants to lead is going to have to, and I think is quite eclectic in looking around the world for good solutions, because he's all about best practice. Yeah. He's not driven by ideology at all.
No.
And that's a strength.
The one person who, and the one sentence that has impressed me most so far in this young government is Wes Streeting, where he came out and he said, from today, our policy is that the NHS is broken, which I thought was a brilliant construction. It's
very bold.
Because it makes you think, for a start, as a sentence, how can a policy be that something's broken? But when you do think about the ramifications of that's our starting position. We're not going to pretend that the NHS is this, mythologized solution to health services that's respected the world over. And
or just trot out
on in envy.
Phony stats about how much towards the end, Sunak was saying we've put record investment into the NHS at a time when people were dying in the corridors at A&E, and that mismatch was huge. Well, here we are. no, and Starmer reiterated that line at the press conference and backed it strongly.
And he called it raw honesty, didn't he?
Raw honesty.
And I think the more we get of that, the better, to be honest.
So the flip side comes back to what you said at the start, Matt, about razzmatazz, which is that kind of honesty, that kind of administrative mindset is excellent, but it needs a narrative to get people through the hard bits.
Yeah.
He isn't running a company. He's not, nor is he running the Crown Prosecution Service. He's Prime Minister. He's the leader, and as much as anyone, perhaps apart from the King, he incarnates the country.
Yeah. And
to do that, and we're in a real mess. This is not 1997. The mess is really big. He has got to, and this isn't a criticism. We're only 4 days in, right? 3 days in. So let's not go too hard on him. But out of this needs to emerge. I'm not expecting him to be Tony Blair, and I think it would be wrong for him to be a Tony Blair type figure at this moment. The mood is not suitable for that. But he is going to have to tell a story, as well as be as visibly and robustly competent as he is. And I'm fascinated to see if he grows in the office, because people do.
Yeah. But I think, increasingly, I watched the whole of that press conference, and literally the graph line of my confidence was rising in, direct proportion to how long he talked. I just got more and more confident that we've got the right guy for the right time.
Yes.
And then I remembered, and I look back at Blair's first conferences and all of this business, and I thought, can you imagine if you had a guy who stood at that podium and said, "A new dawn has broken, has it not?"
Yes.
People would just go, not another one.
Not again.
Not again. So that Tony Blair was certainly, for me, the right guy at the right time. But but this is now.
It's more than a quarter century ago.
That's right. That's right.
It's just different times.
Yeah.
And it could be that Starmer is absolutely right. And look, what can one say? He's made a great start.
Yeah.
We'll be coming back to him all the time, and as you said, we will give him a kicking if it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be credulous.
No.
But we are. We'll give him a fair shake.
Let's have a brief break,
and then we'll come
and talk about some other
forgotten
things.
tribe.
Welcome back.
So
you sent me a couple of notes on what we should talk about, and the headline on the second one was, "Where the hell are all the Tories?"
Well, I mean,
where are they?
I mean, who are they? Where are they? Where did they go? 1 minute they were running the country after a fashion, and then and the next they'd sort of disappeared. The only sort of fact so far is that David Cameron is no longer Shadow Foreign Secretary. Andrew Mitchell is. That's all I got for you, right? And what this does make me think is that, and it should be no surprise, is that they are, they're as shell-shocked as a ward full of First World War poets, really, aren't they? I mean, they really are. And I think it's interesting that this is only July the 8th, but by now, I would have expected at least one or two of the contenders to have
stuck their hand up,
have announced.
Yeah, for sure.
And they haven't, and I'm sure they will this week.
Yeah.
But the sort of silence is extraordinary.
I mean, we haven't even had a line of commentary from the chairman. Last seen pacing around that
winning
sports
by
hall,
20 votes,
looking like his head was about to explode.
Headless chicken
like
with an exploding head.
Mr. Ribena.
It was an extraordinary
perhaps
thing.
He's just got a permanent blood pressure monitor strapped to him.
I mean, one can only imagine what's going through his head still, other than heavy sedation. I mean, what have we had so far? We've had Robert Jenrick.
Yeah.
The one who takes children's murals away. This is Mr. Fun. Saying that the reason the Tories lost was because they weren't tough enough on migration.
That's right.
That was a big surprise. Suella Braverman said she has considered defecting to Reform, which I don't think she will, but that's all part of her Unite the Right narrative. But Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, Victoria Atkins declined to discuss leadership issues, so they're not They haven't come out yet.
What do you think? What's going on in the thinking? Do you think?
I do think the first thing is that the psychological blow has been enormous, because it's funny that on the night, because of the polls, 121 didn't seem perhaps as utterly disastrous as actually in the cold light of day one can now declare it to be. 121 seats, by far the lowest the Tories have ever got in a modern election. The record had previously been held by Balfour in 1906.
Still an astonishing. It was worse than Balfour, wasn't it?
It's worse than Balfour. Now they are the goats. The other meaning of the goats, right? Sunak is officially the worst.
They're the gloats, the greatest losers of all time.
Greatest losers of all time. No, it's amazing how bad they are, and I think that apprehending that and taking its measure is going to take quite some time. The other thing, without getting too much into the weeds, is that there's an internal discussion going on about how to go about it. Now, Sunak, in his resignation speech, used some quite artful language about staying on as leader until the procedure for his replacement being found was in place.
Yeah.
So that means he might go quite quickly.
Yeah.
So what is the procedure? Do they try and do it fast and furious now, or do they go to a sort of beauty contest style thing, which worked quite well for them in 2005 when David Cameron was elected over David Davis.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult thing for a party to do, and it can all fall apart.
And it seems unlikely, given the obvious tensions within the Conservative Party, that they'd be able to all file behind any sort of unity candidate, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, what of course happens is that you have a beauty contest at the convention, at the conference. Sorry, I'm thinking American. At the conference, and then you'd have the parliamentary votes, which would yield a shortlist of 2, which would go to the membership.
Yeah,
who will choose a right winger?
He'll choose the biggest nutcase on the
platform. This is what makes the whole thing. I mean, and partly what underpins your question, which is that they're going to have to go through an agonizing. I mean, it was agonizing enough in 2022 when they had those 2 leadership, changes, and they were in power. This is going to be, talk about 2 bald men arguing over a coat.
Well, so that's the key question. We've got so used to the drama of the Tory party being consequential, but it's not consequential anymore immediately.
No.
But it becomes consequential once, I guess, we understand where Farage is.
Well, that's the other
going,
thing is, of course, what they should be thinking is 2 things. First, the scale of the defeat was not just, as Jenrick says, you weren't tough enough on immigration. Come on, nor was it you're not left wing enough. It was we really hate you. I mean, this was the nation saying go away. We really have had enough of you.
Yeah.
So that's sort of part 1. Part 2 is even harder, which is we've been carrying around this sort of bag of ideas since the late 1970s. Maybe it's time to have an update. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, all of these people we've mentioned are basically, to a greater or lesser extent, believers in low tax, low spending. Now, Tom Tugendhat and Victoria Atkins would be less aggressive on that than Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman and James Cleverly. But essentially that worldview is finished with. There is the centrist radical view that's held by Keir Starmer and Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron and other people, or there's the populist worldview that's held in this country by Farage.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem, is that, and what I think is the greatest risk of this Tory contest is that actually it's conducted defining themselves not against Labour or against the mistakes they themselves have made in the past, but with reference to Farage.
Yes.
Do we try and chase Farage to the right? Do we try and, make him look wrong by being a little bit more centre-right? That's all wrong. I mean, they have to find their own identity.
The more I thought about what Tom Baldwin said at my party, and at the time when Tom said, it's not about right versus left or Tory versus Labour, it's about crazy motherfuckers versus democracy.
It's
right?
helped me with my outro this week in my piece. It was, thank you, Tom.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And a brilliant piece it is, by the way. If people want to get a great précis of what's happened in the last week, I commend Matt Dancona's column in the New European this week, available at most good news agents. But Tom said, it's crazy motherfuckers versus democracy. And I think that is basically the right way to frame it now.
That is what's going on in the world, all over the world. And I'm impressed in talking to Labour folk that they understand, whether they get it right or not is another question, but they understand that they're part of an international struggle.
Yes.
That this is not actually New Labour, New Britain. We are one of the fronts in a battle that's being fought across the free world.
Well, I thought Lammy's air mile collection in the last 48 hours has been very, very impressive.
Significant.
Yeah.
And
by the way, we should mention, because there was a brief flurry of some dickheadery saying, David Lammy is not going to be the foreign secretary. And I'm so glad that the man is.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be, I think, a very good foreign secretary. Yeah. And I think he's put in some serious miles already, actually, in building up connections on the continent, but also hedging against a Trump victory, which is really important because... this week, Starmer's heading off for the NATO summit. And then next week, he's hosting this big meeting of the European political community, I think it's called, which is a sort of not the EU group of 50 leaders founded by Macron.
Yeah.
At Blenheim. And, so already, the pace is so daunting that Starmer has got to now establish himself on the international stage with Lammy's help. And one of the things that they've clearly got to do, the Democrats are their sister party, the links are always stronger. And it was interesting that Labour, I don't think it's ever been done before actually, but Labour put Starmer's call to Biden out on social. It was rather good. I thought the professionalism we shouldn't labour the point, but they've clearly done so much planning. They've clearly got the right expertise in the government. Yes.
I think on the news agents, Emily Maitlis described it as it looked like something out of the West Wing or something like this.
It did.
And it had polish and sheen.
Real polish.
These guys are not amateurs. They are not making this up as they go along.
That's one thing that you can absolutely say with confidence is that, and that again will trouble the Tories, because the Tories have always fancied themselves as the professional Saatchi and Saatchi.
I know, but look at how...
And what a rabble.
What a joke they've been.
Their X account was down, is still down as far as I know. Watching a Labour Party being as professional this quickly will, as if their nerves aren't shattered enough and shredded as it is, will be very difficult for them.
Yeah.
So going back to Starmer going abroad, he's also got to work on the basis that, as things stand, Trump is going to win another term. Incredible to say, he may not, but that's the probability. So Lammy has been building up links with the MAGA land, and that's the right thing to do, because without any sympathy for the content of MAGA, if Trump does win, the Prime Minister of this country, the Foreign Secretary of this country, will have to do business with him, with Trump and his cabinet for 4 years.
And just a point about David Lammy personally, because if people don't know him, because obviously his background is
extraordinary.
It's absolutely remarkable. He comes from the Bridgewater estate, doesn't he? In Tottenham, so absolutely, a real hard place to grow up. But he is one of the most urbane, well-connected, cultured people you could come across. He is an absolute legend in terms of being able to communicate and network.
He is very, very easy with people.
Yeah.
He wears his considerable intellect very lightly.
Yeah.
He does not flash his Rolodex, even though it includes, he went to Harvard with Obama, so he has, they're proper friends.
Yeah.
And he's a hugely impressive character. And another thing about him, I think, which adds to the sort of depth of this government, is that he actually had a kind of a second act, which was very much not what had been predicted for him. He was expected to. He was identified very quickly in New Labour when he was young as a rising star, future leader, all the rest of it, and was a junior minister and all that. But actually, he went to the backbenches and became a sort of tribune character for social justice, and got very involved with the Windrush cause and the Grenfell community, and he still is, by the way. He hasn't left them behind. And when the BLM moment happened in 2020, he was at Starmer's side saying, right, this is how to handle it. With knowledge of community groups. Yeah. It wasn't just a question of Lammy's ethnicity. It was a question of, I know these people, this is what you need to do. You need to be sympathetic, wholly sympathetic to the BLM message, take the knee, but don't defund the police.
Yeah,
which was 100% the right judgment.
Yeah, very clever. Yeah,
and therefore, I mean, that's just one point. I think he's a great asset to Starmer, and I think I'm reasonable reason to think this, that he's helped Starmer become a bit more political.
Yes, yeah. But also interesting is his attitude towards the EU, of course.
Yes,
because he was very, very pro EU.
Oh yes,
I mean, not as much as anybody in Labour.
Yes.
And although we've had Keir Starmer saying, the UK will never rejoin the EU in my lifetime, well, how do you know? But anyway,
it doesn't mean anything.
If you just listen to Lammy's statements about looking for a reset and looking for much close, that gives people like me and yourself, I suspect, a great deal of heart that actually there is a path towards rejoin.
What I think you're seeing is what in the Northern Ireland peace process was called constructive ambiguity.
Yeah.
Which is, Starmer will take the hits for saying never, ever, 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 ever. Not in my lifetime, not on my watch. I love Brexit. It's great. Not quite. But
yes.
And then you'll see around him, I suspect, all sorts of strands of Rachel Reeves is talking about moderations to the trade agreement. Not much, but some. Lammy's talking about big defence cooperation.
Yeah, and actually sitting around the table, really being part of the conversation.
Partly because whatever happens in November, America is withdrawing quite significantly from the world stage, and Europe needs a big defence identity, and therefore it needs the UK to be involved. So what you're going to see, I think, is a lot more de facto collaboration with Europe, which may not be called the single market, the customs union, the EU, but will prepare, I hope, will prepare the ground, and I hope in our lifetimes, for joining. But I think that there's a shrewdness at work here, which is, let's not relitigate 2016. If you ask me, Keir Starmer, what I think about the EU, I'm just, what I'm going to say: no customs union, no single market, no membership.
No freedom of
he's
movement.
A talking clock on that, right?
Yeah.
He's a speak your weight machine, but others around him will be busy burrowing into the sort of arteries and the veins of the European community, broadly understood, to try and get Britain back in the game.
If they can say, okay, on veterinary deals, on food regulation, if you go back and think about the supposed benefits of Brexit were, deregulating all of this stuff so that we could have chlorinated chicken and so on and so forth. Of course, that goes by the wayside if we say, well, no, we're going to make life easier for our businesses to do business with Europe because we will start mirroring the regulations again. That rules all that stuff out. So then the question is, well, what is the point of Brexit? I mean, by de facto, it becomes a sort of an abstract concept then, doesn't it?
And as time passes, it will come not only to look as non-functional, but antiquated.
Yeah.
A few years from now, I mean, we're already 8 years on.
Yeah.
And then there'll be the 10th anniversary, and it'll be clear there's no benefit from it. And
just the fact, Matt, that obviously we're still talking about it because it's at the core of how everything revolves around Brexit for us politically. But everyone's still talking about Brexit. And, no one can... I remember Nick Robinson in 2017 saying, it's done, it's dusted, move on, we'll no longer be talking about it. Well, Nick Robinson's talking about it every other week,
Of course he is.
So we're all still talking about it. That is a plain indicator that it's an absolute fuck up.
And I think also you get to a certain point where its uselessness as a delivery system for what it claimed to deliver will just become plain. I mean, I think it's been plain for a long time, to be honest, but it won't become taboo to say that. And it will suddenly, and these things change very unexpectedly. You never know when they're going to change. There will just come a day when saying, well, maybe we should rejoin the single market, or maybe we should maybe don't call it the rejoining the single market. Maybe,
Well, maybe they'll call it something else.
Brussels will come up with an ingenious name for it.
Yeah, the UK-EU trading
special,
pact.
The super adventure club. I don't know, just some sort of wording that enables us to effectively have membership of the thing. And then before you know it, it's happened.
One specific, which I think is very interesting and worth watching, is around the freedom of movement for students, because our universities are in a lot of trouble.
Huge trouble.
So you've got a situation where, we're getting a big influx of foreign students from China and from Asia generally, and maybe the States, but we're seeing them dry up from the EU, and they are universities are in danger of going bankrupt and out of business because the $9,000 our guys are paying isn't enough. And so we need, reality is the foreign students subsidise our students.
Yes.
So at some point you're going to get either a rash of universities closing and a lot fewer kids going to university, or you're going to face the prospect of saying, well, we're going to have to put the $9,000 up significantly to fund universities, which is absolutely unpalatable. Or you're going to have to say, well, we'll welcome more students from the European Union who are gagging to come in.
I think the key that opens the door to everything is the Prime Minister, and I hope it's Starmer, I really do, who has the sort of foresight and the courage, because it will take courage, to do a big reset on immigration generally.
Yeah.
And say every government should preside over, robust border management. We get that. But we live in a world where we need a considerable degree of free movement. And whether you like it or not, climate change is going to mean that there are hundreds of millions of climate refugees, so that we have to collaborate with other countries to deal with that.
Yeah.
We need, for reasons like sectoral reasons, like the one you mentioned, higher education, but also in lots of other sectors too. We need to have much more mobility. And therefore, I'm pouring a huge amount of money into border management, the courts, processing, so that we have fair, compassionate, and swift handling of this issue, which has plagued this country for too long. And by the way, immigration is net good. That's the sentence that I would love to hear a Prime Minister say.
Yeah.
And we're a long way off it.
That's right. What did you make of Tony Blair's idea around national documentation? So national identity cards.
He's certainly right that it would make the whole question of documented, undocumented a lot easier.
Yeah.
I have to say, and I say this as a great admirer of the man, that I thought that it was a misstep to publish on the first Sunday of Starmer's premiership a huge "this is how you do it" in the Sunday Times.
It was the biggest misstep was not publishing it in the New European. But
of course, if it had been in the New European, it would have been a sage and enlightened piece. But also, Blair was complaining that the Sunday Times had lifted the sexiest lines for their front page. Well, come on,
really?
I find that rather
what
hard to believe.
What a rare outbreak of proper journalism!
Dare they do that? I think it's part of it.
Yeah,
it could be part of it. But I honestly think that the dealing with it is not just confined to a one single strand like that. It's we in the modern world. Particularly if you're in a centre ground government that deals with the real world and how to generate growth and decency.
Yeah,
remember all that stuff, good stuff.
Yeah.
The status quo, which is smash the gangs or send them to Rwanda or just tough talk, is not enough.
But explain to me who is now, apart from the hardcore civil liberty groups.
Yes.
If your premise is that you only want people who are allowed to be here, What is your good argument against a national identity card?
I don't think there are any. And I think that I'll tell you when, almost to the day when they stopped being having any value, was the day that the iPhone was launched.
Yeah.
Because now that we all carry these devices around, which have so much more information on them about us than any ID card ever could.
Yeah.
There is a civil liberties argument which you referred to, which is one of the things that makes Britain special is that you don't have to produce papers to the police. But in all honesty, you often do have to produce ID now in all sorts of settings. Yeah. And I think that the gap between what we have to do now already and a formal ID card is so slim that it's worth it to get to the good things that could come out of that.
Agree. I agree. I would support it wholeheartedly. And I've never really understood this thing about you don't have to tell the police who you are, because I think you bloody well should do if the police.
Yes, I mean, look,
especially given the way that our police generally. All right, I'm getting into hot water here because there's so many examples of where they've behaved appallingly.
Yes,
but in principle, it's not the Guardia Civil. It's like it is a liberal in principle. Yes. It's a liberal by consent
and
policing.
They can ask if you're driver's license. Is that fascistic?
Yeah.
Of course it's not. I think it's long been one of those weird ancestral taboos that we kind of say, but we can't do that for reasons that we've forgotten.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what makes us special.
It's generally a good moment to think, well, maybe we should just do it. But I do think, I do think that at some point, a Prime Minister, I don't know if it'll be Starmer, I really hope it is, has to challenge the public on this.
Yeah.
Because the idea that immigration... Basically, the default position now is that immigration is bad. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
And you talk about cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Complaining about the NHS and not being able to get an appointment.
That's right.
And then complaining about immigrants.
That's right.
And allowing Farage, with the exception of Stephen Flynn, who was the leader of the the Westminster leader of the SNP in the debates, everyone allowing Farage in the debates to get away with they take away all the capacity from public services. Wrong.
Yeah. They are the public service.
They are the public services.
Fucking idiots.
I mean, and that I think is one of the reasons that if I was Starmer thinking about what to do about Farage, and I'm sure and I hope he's not giving too much thought to it at all at the moment, but in the long term, I think, well, actually, I can use this as a screen against which to redefine myself and the country's trajectory. Is like, you really want to be like this guy?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Now, this is a high-risk strategy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people do want to be like Farage.
Yeah.
But not, I think, anything close to a majority.
Well, maybe the truest thing that he's said is that what will regain trust in politics is action, not words. And he's got 4 years now to act.
He's got the full might of the state. He's got a 174-seat majority.
Yeah. No excuses,
Yeah, no excuses. I mean, that's kind of the top line, isn't it?
Yeah, good. Anyway, we wish him a fair
We do wish him well.
Yeah,
we do wish him well. I wanted things to work out.
We'll return to it, I'm sure, in every single
multiple podcasts.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you did enjoy it and you listen to the two Matts, you will love the New European newspaper. And you can subscribe at an absolute bargain rate of £1 a week and £2 a week if you want to get the newspaper delivered through your door every single week. And by the way, the paper costs £4.50 in the newsagent, so that is more than 80% discount. So can't do fairer than that, can we?
You can't.
And well, we can actually. What we'll do is give you a £25 voucher to spend at the New European shop as well. On top of that amazing
got a bit
discount.
Chris Tarrant there, didn't it? But you don't want to take this check.
So do the right thing. All of this politics and media doesn't get better by itself. If you think we're doing good independent journalism, help us. It's expensive. Help us pay for it.
Show me the money.
Show us the money and we'll show you the paper.
Exactly.
Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS, and there's a link in the show notes. Thank you as ever to our production team at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill. And we'll be back on Friday.
With our normal
regular I don't. It's hard to tell the difference now between the election pod and the normal pod.
It's just a seamless web of genius.
But join us on Friday and spread the word. See you.
Have a good week.